Good evening. I'm Alexandria Brooks, and it is July 19th, 2019, and I am sitting in front of my parents, Wayne and Debbie, and I'm going to present to them today my speech on how the Asian culture differs from the American culture. After listening to my speech, the audience will have a better understanding of the Asian culture and how it differs from the American culture through a person's body language, emotions, and through their speech. Imagine that you're in a classroom with your peers and you have just been given or have just been called up by the teacher for an award for $100 because you have had excellent attendance. All you have to do is stand up from your seat and go accept the award in front of your whole class, but you get $100. Would you do it? I would too. And I feel like you would be crazy if you didn't. But if we look at other cultures other than the American culture, they might not respond to your $100 gift a similar way as Americans would. Looking at an Asian culture, we would see that they might not want to stand up in front of everybody. That's not normally how they are raised in that culture. They are more raised as sit back, do not put yourself out there too much. Do not be like, oh, look at me. And that's very how Americans are, which isn't bad. We have our own sense of identity, whereas the Asian culture is more focused on a group. In my presentation, I will be informing you about today's Asian culture and explaining specific cultural values that they exemplify. These values will include high and low context values, individualism and collectivism within the Asian culture, and high and low power distance cultures. First, we will look at high and low context cultures. Values, I apologize. Then individualism and collectivism within that Asian culture. And then finally, we will end on talking about high and low power distance. Starting with high and low power distance, I'll tell you a definition because just so we're not lost in communication here. According to the Understanding Human Communication textbook, in low context cultures, members use language to express their thoughts, feelings, and ideas as directly as possible, whereas high context cultures rely heavily on subtle, nonverbal cues to maintain that social harmony. An example of a low context culture would be threatening a neighbor because their dog kept barking all night long. This is more harsh and straight to the point. But an example of a high context culture would be praising your neighbor's daughter for playing the piano so beautifully, even if it's in the middle of the night. This is more of a subtle approach than going straight forward and telling her that her daughter needs to stop playing at night. It's more of, let's go a nicer route. During my research, I came across an article that took a look at an Asian child who had suffered the loss of one of their grandparents. And the researchers in this article realized that the child didn't show normal sympathetic emotions towards this tragedy. In the American culture, we would be devastated and we would react to this loss normally. But looking at the Asian culture, that is not a normal thing. They do not want to disrupt this social harmony. So the little boy's reaction to this wasn't off when compared to his Asian culture. Throughout my research of this presentation, I realized that the Asian culture is more of a group as far as if they want to accept an award or the way they present themselves. And this brings us to our second value that's within the Asian culture: individualism and collectivism. In simple terms, an individualistic culture focuses on I and me. People in these cultures are very independent and they don't feel the need to have help from others. But whereas collectivistic cultures, they work together as a group. They use we and us. In an article from the Journal of Cultural Diversity, a professor in the field of nursing was approached with the task of teaching a full class of nursing students who were of the Asian countries and they had that Asian culture. And she struggled with not a belligerent student or a rude student. It was more of students who didn't want to talk, they didn't want to put themselves out there. So when she had given one of her students an award for traveling the farthest, the student did not want to go up to the class and put herself out there. And in her mind, basically, she thought, I won this award and you guys didn't. And where, as an American, I would think of it more as, I'm proud of myself and I want to thank you for giving me this award and acknowledging that I did work hard to get here from such a faraway place. But to this Asian woman, in her mind, because of her culture, she was more reserved and didn't want to accept that award, but instead wanted to congratulate her peers for also coming far and traveling such a long way for this goal. Getting on to our third and final value that I really saw through the Asian culture was the high and low power distance. And we can think of a low power distance culture as Generation Zers, or Gen Z. And these are the people who were born mid-1990 to 2000, and I am actually a Generation Z baby, I guess. And those are the people who question authority, not meaning in a rude way, but they look at how things have been working in life all this time and they just want to know why. So they kind of break the rules, they bend them a little, and they just want to question it. But whereas high power distance, so the Gen Z people who broke the rules, those were the low power distance culture. But if we're looking at the high power distant culture, those are people who just, I can look at it more as respect your elders. You don't question the authority. There's no bending the rules. It is what it is, and that's set in stone. In a real life example of high power context culture, Asian parents are known for being strict on their children when it comes to their academic success. And we can see in stories that Asian children have huge achievements with their academic success, and it is because of their parents, lack of better words, hounding them, because they know the struggles that they go through. And I feel like this is where they differ with American parents, because they bring themselves back to where they differed. They bring themselves back to where they struggled, and they emphasize that on their child, that they need to make something of themselves. Whereas American parents are a little bit more lenient. They do talk with their child, and both cultures have their differences and both have their advantages of not stressing a child out, but also helping the child along the way in their academic success. And wrapping this up, I want to say thank you for both of you for listening to my speech tonight, and I hope that you have at least a little bit of an understanding of the Asian culture and how it differs from the American culture, but yet it's still so captivating and edifying to really know that just a plane ride away, there's a whole different, basically, world out there that we are not used to. I would love to leave you with an inspirational quote that I had found online from Robert Allen, which states, "Cultural differences should not separate us from each other, but rather cultural differences should bring a collective strength that can benefit all of humanity." And what I took out of that quote was more that I really appreciated doing this presentation because I did get to learn a lot about the Asian culture, whereas I just thought of them as being shy, reserved kids who just didn't really want to speak up, but it's more that that's how they were raised, and they might look at the American culture and judge us differently too, but it was nice to see and interesting that I could delve deeper into this and really understand who and what this culture was about. So again, I say thank you for really listening to me, and I hope you have a good night.